Aaron Dykes here for True Stream Media. Now, a while back, we did a video called Chemtrails, Watch This, Then Try to Deny It, and not only had compelling footage that we shot of persistent aerosols in the sky as we saw them, but all kinds of background info about the policy discussions, the experimentation, and the plans that they have for geoengineering the planet. Now, today, Collective Evolution published this article that I saw. NASA admits to chemtrails as they propose spraying stratospheric aerosols into Earth's atmosphere. And it shows a recent presentation from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory discussing geoengineering.
A lot of funding is being spent around the world on adapting, preparing for the worst. Okay, so that's plan A. Now what happens if that's not enough? Here's where geoengineering comes in. Plan B.
And it makes clear that this is not up for debate as to whether or not it's being talked about, whether or not it's actually going on.
To increase the albedo, right? So I can turn up the albedo, make the Earth shinier. And this is called solar radiation management.
It's a question of who's going to run this system and what will the policies be. And this took place about a year ago in February 2013.
So there have been a variety of schemes proposed, ranging from zany to pretty low tech. And they all have to do with getting aerosols into the stratosphere and keeping them there for years and years and years. So for example, if we used existing technology, if we used aircraft, this would be the equivalent of taking a small airline and just saying, you do nothing but spray aerosols in the stratosphere for the next N decades.
So right there, his first example of using existing technology to put these aerosols into the sky is using jet aircraft. So is it ridiculous to talk about chemtrails in the sky being part of geoengineering? Absolutely not. It's being discussed in a very serious format here in NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab about how to mitigate climate change, what to do about it, what's being discussed. And he goes on to talk about all the negative consequences that they know can happen from this.
There are a lot of issues. One is it's known from looking at volcanic eruptions and this cooling effect that you get uneven heating and you actually cause drought in some areas. So country A decides to do geoengineering and they cause a drought in country B. You know, the missiles start flying. What happens if we stop it abruptly? If we can't get control of CO2 and we start, injecting stuff into the stratosphere, it's costing us $10 billion a year, and we have an economic meltdown or a natural disaster or a volcano erupts and we can't fly airplanes for a while. What happens if that shield is removed quickly? We rapidly jump up in temperature. Even greater than that is the fact of what we call instability in the system. If you whack a bell, it rings for a while. The concern of the climate system ringing like a bell and being unstable.
But we're going to see this not only has consequences for the environment, but for who gets to control the environment, what that means for global power. Those are some of the most important questions. Now watch what he says here.
And there are other issues. What about weaponization? If you grew up watching The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman like me, and remember there's an episode where the bad guy builds a weather machine and he's holding all the governments hostage. Well, this is not science fiction anymore. It really could work. Not to mention the distraction of spending cost and and again, arguments over the thermostat. Whose hands on the thermostat, right? Look how hard it is to get international agreements on anything.
They know it can do everything from cause drought to cause global disagreements. It can empower a rogue individual to unilaterally control the atmosphere, maybe plan out a Dr. Strangelove or James Bond kind of mad scientist hostage situation.
If it's perceived to be cheap and effective, then in the words of Dr. Strangelove, it merely requires the will of trying this, right? And the perception of this could lead to unilateral action. And don't take my word for it. Listen to the World Economic Forum. Every year they put out a risk assessment. Just a couple of weeks ago they put out a risk assessment and they listed 5 wild cards or X factors for the 21st century. Rogue geoengineering was one of those. This is The Economist and the business leaders worrying about somebody taking rogue action.
He literally said from NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratories that a legitimate concern is the weaponization of geoengineering. What happens if a mad scientist holds the planet hostage? I'm just going to play it again.
What about weaponization? The bad guy builds a weather machine and he's holding all the governments hostage. Well, this is not science fiction anymore.
That's right. The top globalists are worried about unilateral action with geoengineering because they know testing is underway. They count on the public's ignorance, and we're stuck debating whether or not geoengineering is going on, whether or not the chemtrail phenomenon is really what the conspiracy theorists think it is. And here's NASA talking about, we're concerned about rogue geoengineers. We're concerned about a mad scientist hostage situation. We're worried about the Dr. Strangeloves who work partially in private sector, partially inside secret parts of the government.
Weather modification programs, experimental ones done by private companies, done by the United States government, done by states across the United States, are underway. There's more than 50 of them in operation across the United States. None of these programs that I know of today, and this is all public record, are available at any time with oversight, agricultural oversight or public oversight. These programs impact agriculture, and there are programs around the world, international corporations are modifying our weather all the time.
The policy is there. The ideas of using albedos, solar radiation management for geoengineering are there. But who's involved? Well, here's the Business Insider talking about the CIA wanting to control weather through geoengineering. And once something like geoengineering goes through secret channels of government, once it becomes a matter of national security, the public's ability and, quote, right to know goes straight down the tubes. And we see as well that indeed the CIA is co-sponsoring geoengineering studies, and so are a lot of private individuals. The CFR has been talking about since 2008 the issues with unilateral geoengineering and the consequences of rogue individuals taking hold of the technology, and there could be unintended consequences from geoengineering, and they know it. They know there's, quote, significant risks, but they're willing to do it anyway if they decide things are serious enough. The UK government has also discussed the regulation of geoengineering, as has the Royal Society, the think tank that leads the UK government's thinking. They're talking about the framework for regulation on geoengineering. They recommend a global type of framework around it, and they want the idea out there that geoengineering should be a, quote, public good. That is, it should be in the public interest. It affects everyone. At the same time, they recognize that they don't want their governance to get in the way of the testing and operations that are already going on, which they tacitly acknowledge. Number 21, they consider that a ban, even a short-term ban, on all solar radiation management geoengineering testing would prevent work on geoengineering as Plan B, and it would be not only unenforceable because they have no laws to prevent geoengineering testing that may well already be going on, and it seems to be, but they say it may be counterproductive to wait and see if it's even a safe idea to do SRM and geoengineering technology. Could there be unilateral geoengineering going on? Well, it has already happened, and a lot of people are mad about it. Many people argue that it violates UN treaties. And here it is in the London Guardian: world's biggest geoengineering experiment violates UN rules. And what happened was a billionaire, Russ George, went and dumped several thousand tons of iron ore into the ocean to prevent plankton blooms. But there's a lot of arguments over the unintended consequences with that, but particularly over the recognition that one individual with a lot of money can go and change the environment for the whole globe. Obviously, that could have consequences. So are they going to lead towards a truly global regulatory framework on climate change, on geoengineering? Well, many of these experts think that that could be counterproductive as well. And here's a paper from Ken Caldera, who along with David Keith is one of the two leading experts in geoengineering, talking about strategic incentives for climate geoengineering coalitions to exclude broad participation. They don't want everyone weighing in on this. They have no interest in the public knowing about this in general. They want as few players involved in geoengineering as possible. And here's Urian Mason's breakdown of this on explosivereports.com, an awesome investigative writer, about the scientists who advocate an exclusive club to assume command of global geoengineering. And among other things, they talk about how a sufficiently powerful international coalition is needed to deploy solar geoengineering, but noting that there could be regional differences in climate outcomes, that patching up the climate in one area could cause droughts in other areas, they still want incentives to form coalitions that are as small as possible. So if that's on the national level, that means just the U.S. and certain European players. If it's on the private individual level, maybe that means billionaires. They don't want all that many people involved in implementing this, even though they recognize it's international. In this paper, this Ken Caldera paper, talks about what they call in gaming theory the global thermostat setting game through an exclusion club, and they have all kinds of incentives and buy-ins and opt-outs that make a, quote, public good, something in the public interest, under the power of an exclusive club or an exclusion club, which has rights to make decisions apart from the general public, just like with a club where you have to be a member to attend meetings and so forth. Who might be involved in this on the private billionaire level? Who might be making geoengineering decisions? Well, who could already be making geoengineering decisions? The NASA expert talks about how Bill Gates is involved in this, how people like Richard Branson are involved in this. Watch what ABC News said about a secret billionaires club.
Price of admission is $1 billion and a philanthropic heart.
The price of admission, being part of their club, being able to have voting power in their club, means $1 billion and a philanthropic heart. That alone right there is an exclusion club, and this was about a private meeting between Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, Ted Turner, Oprah Winfrey, and other leading billionaires discussing population and charity. But just to be at the meeting, the price of admission is having $1 billion and a, quote, philanthropic heart. Well, what are they arguing about at their charity meeting? Maybe this is a clue if you know how to read into the legal language behind things. Think about this kind of thinking and the effects it could have on geoengineering.
The super rich friends, not fighting bad guys, but fighting for good nonetheless.
Fighting for good or fighting for the right to control what they call the public good. Think about the legal loophole language. Who has the rights to make decisions about the public good? Well, it's those who have membership in the exclusion club, in this case, those with $1 billion and a philanthropic heart. When we talk about chemtrails, the relevant question is no longer does it exist, what level is it going on? The relevant question is who will be in control of the decisions that are being made? Is it wise at all to implement geoengineering? If you don't think so, you better recognize at least the fact that many groups are involved in it already.